Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge, and welcome to Eldridge and Company. My friend Annia Ciezadlo is a very busy freelance writer. She's based in Beirut, and she covers the Middle East and writes for the Christian Science Monitor, The Nation, the National Journal, the New Republic, and even some other publications. So, Annia, how did you get to the Middle East?
Well, I think in part you are responsible, Ronnie.
Oh, well, let's not start that.
I was working for a small magazine called City Limits that covers New York City politics and poverty and housing and things like that. And I met a very nice young man who covered New York City transportation, which I just thought was incredibly glamorous, that he wrote about the subways and transportation policy and the MTA. And I fell in love, and he ended up becoming a foreign correspondent. So we moved to Beirut. He actually started covering the Middle East right after September 11th.
Well, he's from Lebanon.
He's Lebanese.
And he speaks Farsi. I don't know what the difference is in the languages. What does he?
Fluent Arabic.
Arabic.
Which is what they speak in most of the Arab world, and then it's Farsi in Iran. So the Arabic doesn't help him there.
Yeah.
So we moved to Beirut so that he could cover. He's the bureau chief for Newsday. We moved to Beirut so that he could cover, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and the rest of the Arab world from there. So that's how I ended up.
So, and you've spent a lot of time in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. Mm-hmm. So you're right in the heart of where I think what.
Well, it's funny.
The major challenge to this country,
the challenge,
I guess, other than China. Right?
Yeah, the challenge, but also the opportunity. I mean, it's become a cliche that there's change sweeping the Arab world, and especially since the Cedar Revolution in the first half of this year. And
where was that?
That was in Lebanon. That was in Beirut, and that was really happening in Beirut, but also very much affecting Syria and slightly Iraq in a sort of ripple effect. But even though I think that cliche is way overblown, and I think people tend to overestimate the amount of change that the Cedar Revolution actually caused, it is an era of a lot of change in all of these countries, and so it's been a very fascinating time.
And the ironic part is that Mohammed left Lebanon because his parents wanted him to come here to get out of all the fighting and violence.
As they never failed to point out when he became a war correspondent.
Right, and so he goes back. So what I'm interested in, and I mean, watching the Hurricane Katrina and all of the devastation and the conditions that people are living under and everything, it just seemed to, I wondered, what happens to people who are in besieged cities?
Yeah.
I mean, what happened? We talked a little bit before about Baghdad and that it's basically a very cosmopolitan city. But it's now filled with danger all the time, and the electricity and this and that and everything else.
Yeah.
What's it like?
Well, Baghdad, I mean, it was, actually, I spent 8 months there, not all at once, but sort of spaced out over a period of about a year and a half. And the really horrible thing was seeing it lose that quality of openness to the rest of the world and lose that sort of cosmopolitan quality gradually over time as people became more and more frightened, more and more afraid to leave the house. When I got there in October of 2003, it was a fun city in a way. I mean, it was still very scary, but you could go out at night, you could walk around.
Saddam had left by then.
Yes,
yeah,
he had left, and in fact, he was captured in December of 2003, and that's kind of when things started to go to hell, because that's when the insurgency really redoubled its efforts. There were a lot of assassinations after that, and I think there was also a growing sense among a lot of Iraqis. A lot of people would say to me over and over again, I would hear this, okay, you guys, you caught Saddam, now time to go. Isn't that what you came here to do? And why are you still here? Because people had stopped believing by then that we were there to rebuild and reconstruct the country. Even at that point, it had been long enough that people were amazed that we didn't have the electricity and the water working.
Right back.
And look, it's what is it, September of 2005, and we still don't.
Did children go to school every day?
I wrote a number of stories about this. A lot of children don't, but it's still amazing to me how many people do. And it's really a testimony to the courage of the Iraqi people, because a lot of them are just really, really determined that their kids will have an education that they kind of couldn't have before the war. Because even though Saddam maintained the school system and everybody had to go to school. People knew that their children weren't really learning everything, and people really want a more
open and
people want to take advantage of the new sort of freedom of speech that they have, and so a lot of people, they have this horrible choice. I can't even imagine what it must be like for parents to think, on one hand, my child might get killed. On the other hand, I want to be able to have them have an education.
Does business get conducted normally? Is anything normal?
No.
No.
No,
Right.
not really.
So people are living in an upside down world. I mean, it's frightening.
Well, people. The thing
Have
about
they gotten used to it?
Yeah, you have to. But people. What happens in this sort of situation, and I think this happened to some extent during the Lebanese Civil War as well. You try to carry on, and you try to maintain, and you try to sort of. You eke out whatever of your routines that you can, but you spend a lot of time waiting. You spend most of your time waiting.
Yeah. How many people have left? A lot of people?
From Iraq?
Yeah.
Nobody knows. They don't know. If you
can't
ask
tell.
the Iraqi government, they'll
Right.
tell you they don't know, but hundreds of thousands.
So, we're so concerned and so involved with the difference between the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Kurds and the attempt to put the constitution together and so that everybody can live, and the difference in the interests and the fact that it most likely will be a theocracy, and what does that mean to people's liberties and stuff. If in fact all these people if they want to learn what's going on in the world, they're supportive of the Shiites' attempt to bring back more of the rule of Islam?
You mean the majority of Iraqis?
Yeah.
Well, the majority of Iraqis are Shiites.
Yeah. And they really are observant?
It's hard to tell from Baghdad because Baghdad's very secular strain compared to the rest of the country. The majority of Shiites will tell you that they're believers, but people have different definitions of what a believer is.
Yeah.
And so you have some pretty surprising truths about what it means to be a believer. For example, in Najaf, which is the most devout city, and it's sort of ancient holy city of Shiism, something like 80 to 90% of people don't see any problem with women being in political life and having, sort of being politicians and holding elected office. And people there don't really see that as incompatible with being a devout Shiite woman, which has really surprised me. There were a couple of Gallup polls that showed these results. I think it's a little different on the Sunni side of the equation. And I think the growing influence of Salafi Islam, which is very sort of, you could call it fundamentalist, but that's sort of not really accurate. It's a very militant strain of Sunni Islam, and that's really gaining a lot of ground in Iraq.
So is Sunni Islam, are they the insurgents? It's so confusing. If we try to make this understandable, it's so difficult. Here you have the attempt to have a federalized government so that each of these different people have control over their own lands, and the Sunnis who want a centralized, strong government, right? Is that what they're arguing about?
No, the Sunni, there's a lot of different groups that compose each of these groups, so they all have different subgroups. And it's true that the Sunnis are very highly represented in the insurgency, but there's also Muqtada Sadr, who's not quite, you can't really call that the insurgency, but he's also sort of a militant strain of Islam, and that's Shiite. But they fit the definition of what we would call a fundamentalist. When you see reports of people going in and machine gunning a liquor store and things like that, often that
because they're against the liquor, right?
They're against the liquor. There's also a lot of accounts of Shiites, militant Shiites, especially in places like Basra, going around and assassinating Sunnis, harassing students who aren't wearing headscarves, who are listening to music, things like that. So you definitely have different subgroups that make up all of these things. The insurgency, though, one thing that I think has been sort of underestimated is there's a lot of Baathists, a lot of ex-Baathists in the insurgency, and a lot of people who may not be religiously motivated, but who are just...
But they were Saddam followers, so they're angry. Mm-hmm. So what is the battle all about? We don't know.
think it's about a lot of things.
Yeah, it's not one thing.
Yeah, but a lot of it is just, you know, people are opposed to, you know, American soldiers being on their soil. And
so we know that there's growing opposition in this country to our policy and a desire to get out. You've just said that there's a sizable number of people who want the Americans out. But you're not sure the Americans should get out, or you are sure that they should not get out.
Yeah,
Explain
I am.
it.
This is something I've had a lot of arguments about with a lot of my close friends. I think before I went to Iraq, the idea of Saddam and what life was like under Saddam was very abstract to me. You know, it was bad, but so is Burma, so is, you know, so are a lot of other places, North Korea. You know, if we're going to go around the world getting rid of dictators, there's plenty of candidates, like our newfound friend, Muammar Gaddafi, for example.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really something that I thought of in a very concrete way. And then I spent 8 months in Iraq and made friends and got to really know people. And the idea that we went in there to get rid of weapons of mass destruction is absurd.
Well, I think that's accepted by everybody, right?
But at the same time, during the lead up to the war, there was sort of this idea that, well, there aren't WMDs and Saddam isn't going to try to attack America, as many people claimed. And you could read the New Yorker, and the New Yorker would be telling you that Saddam was going to, you know, bomb America with chemical weapons. And you would think, so why would we go there? And then you go to Iraq and you see, like, how people lived and what a shame it was and how horrible it was and how hungry people were for intervention. And really the majority of people were. You know, they might not have admitted it on TV. And you would have a lot of conversations where you would start out and people would say...
Is that true in Baghdad also?
It's not true anymore.
No,
not
but
after,
it was true when you first got there?
It was when I first got there, which was October of 2003, which is pretty far into the occupation.
Yeah.
And I think I was amazed at how much support there was for American intervention amongst all classes. There were a lot of Sunnis who hated Saddam. And I think they've been sort of underestimated. And a lot of them have now joined the insurgency because, you know, American soldiers might have killed one of their relatives, because they might have been thrown in jail, because they're just angry that, you know, it's been, what is it now, 2.5 years, and we still haven't gotten the lights on or the water. And
but the Shiites don't join the
I'm sure some of them do.
do.
Yeah, I'm sure there's very few, but they'd be more likely to join Muqtada Sadr's Mahdi army, which is...
So if you lived in Fallujah, you've had it terrible with everybody.
Yeah.
Is that right? I mean, have we destroyed that city? Was that a cosmopolitan city to start?
No. Fallujah was always a crossroads on the smuggling network, smuggling oil and things like that out of the country. And it was actually also a lot of support for. There were a lot of people from Fallujah made up the sort of Republican Guard and the sort of elite units of Saddam's various forces. But there is, in that area that we call the Sunni Triangle, that was the heart of a Sunni uprising, or failed, of course, against Saddam. And so there was a lot of sort of opposition to Saddam when we first got there. That was really a squandered opportunity in terms of, you know, how we could have won over that population. Samarra, Fallujah, all these cities had a lot of people who were very, very angry at Saddam. And all those people, you know, after their sort of brief honeymoon with America, have gone back to, you know, to sort of being against America.
So what do you propose then that we do? We certainly have made a mess of things, haven't we? Not necessarily in Iraq, but in the rest of the Middle East.
Oh, definitely in Iraq.
And in Iraq, yeah. So what do you think the United States should do?
You know, it's a harder question than, you know, should we stay or should we go?
It should be United Nations, but we're so busy weakening the United Nations that we make it impossible, right?
It's amazing to me with the amount of, there's a lot of anger in Iraq at the United Nations, I think just in part because they were there.
Yeah, and then they pulled out. Right?
And then they pulled out. People felt very betrayed by that, and I don't think they understood that they sort of had to. But at the same time, there's a lot of support for the United Nations because it's seen as being sort of above, you know, the fray of America and Israel.
Right.
And so something that was under international auspices, I think, would probably be much more welcome than, you know, multinational forces, i.e. America. And
Do people,
Great Britain.
what do people say in Lebanon and in Syria and everything about the Bush administration or about Bush?
Well, it's interesting. I actually, in the run-up to the Bush-Kerry election, I did a lot of interviews because I was doing a story, what do Iraqis think of, Bush versus Kerry? And I'd be astounded at the depth of support for Bush among a lot of people. A lot of Iraqis. One guy actually had a picture of Bush that he carried in his wallet, and he said he kissed it every day.
So they're just as bad as the Americans who voted for him.
Well, no, here's an interesting thing. In Iraq, which is almost complete opposite of in America, it's the educated, cosmopolitan, urban, it's the intelligentsia who support Bush because they, see, they're sort of pragmatic about it, and they say, okay, well, things are really bad now, but,
the Bush
get rid of Saddam.
Just as we talk about this and we look at the UN and we know that Bush led us into this war under totally deceitful
as Colin Powell
reasons.
Just admitted,
right? And we know that that Cheney was out in the Middle East talking to the Iraqis, to Iran and Iraqis. Iran was it many years ago, and Rumsfeld was out in the Middle East. I mean, this same group has always been, it seems to me, determined to move into the Middle East to protect their interests. And now they've sent Bolton to the United Nations, where he's managed to attempt to disrupt the future plans or the plans for reorganization. I mean, it just continues to go on in a very disruptive and bad way. At least I think it does.
There's a theory that gained a lot of credibility in the past couple of years, I think, among members of this government. And it's hard to tell how much people believe in it because they'll say, no, we don't. But then, they'll say that they do. It's called constructed chaos or constructive instability.
Right.
And it's this idea that, you go in and you sort of mess stuff up and that is healthy and it leads to ferment and change. And I think a lot of people were very quick to pronounce the Cedar Revolution, which was a Beirut-based uprising, as evidence that Iraq had been this great triumph and that it actually worked, that we went into Iraq and we messed a bunch of stuff up.
Yeah, and
it led to the toppling of a pro-Syria government in Beirut. And it's incredibly simplistic. And Iraqis are not dumb. They watch satellite channels and they're very, very hungry for news from the rest of the world. And so when they see people on TV, I always tell people about Bush's State of the Union address when he said we took the battle to the terrorists and we're fighting them in Iraq. That was a watershed moment for Iraqis because they believed, a lot of them believed, that we were there to free them and to liberate them. I mean, we told them that and we went there and we put our money where our mouth was, or at least some of our money, probably not enough. And then suddenly they turn on the TV and they see Bush saying, we're fighting in Iraq to make America safe. And by then it was far enough along that people were starting to really, the bloom was off the rose as far as making their lives better. And people saw that and they said, wait a minute, we thought you were here for us. You're fighting your war on our soil. That's what they heard. And Middle Eastern countries have a long tradition of that. The Lebanese Civil War was largely a proxy war. People are very conscious of that there. And so to have Bush say, well, we're fighting our war on your soil, that did not go over well at all. And so the whole constructive instability idea, when you see what the instability actually is, when it's people's sons, daughters, children, mothers, husbands getting killed day after day after day, and people living with hardly any electricity or water for 2.5 years now, they don't view it as particularly constructive.
It's interesting because the terrorists, bin Laden and other groups, believe in the same thing, it seems to me, with their, not the same determined, but they're trying to, with their different spots and unexpected terrorist activities.
Except there's one difference, which is they have
chaos.
A very, very concrete goal in mind, and we don't.
That's true. Right.
They have a plan, They're doing it for a very specific reason. It's a very calculated tactic.
What is their plan?
In Iraq, the plan is to destroy the credibility and the functionality of any government that will be formed. And I believe to prevent the formation of a Shiite government. And so that's actually, when you think about it, that's actually much
And then
more
what
concrete.
happens? And then what happens?
Then they come back to power, and then
I see.
and then they have their own religious theocracy. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't think anyone really knows exactly what their end game is.
Yeah.
But in terms of their short-term tactics,
Yeah.
that's the reason behind the terrorist tactics that you see in Iraq is basically to destroy the government that the Iraqis are trying to build. So.
And then you've got the terrorism in Spain, which was to warn the Spaniards not to send the people to Iraq. Terrorism in London. I mean, you've got it all over now, and I guess increasingly the theory is that it's not Osama bin Laden planning all of this.
No,
that it's now, that story I was telling you about in the New York Times Magazine section. There was a blob of mercury, and we came and hit it, and it's now all over these little pieces, and they're all working that way.
It was already a blob of mercury.
Yeah.
It was already a blob of mercury before Iraq, and the
Broken
idea,
or not?
Oh yeah.
Broken.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was
many little blobs, and I think it's a common misconception that Al Qaeda, even at the time of September 11th, it was already it was a franchise. I think is sort of the most effective metaphor. He might be the sort of beacon for a lot of people, but there were already plenty of different cells all over. And that's the scary thing, which is that Iraq and the chaos in Iraq is really drawing people now. And in a way, we've congealed the blob of mercury.
Yes, right. We're bringing it back again.
We're bringing it back together because we've basically created this excellent cause for them and this excellent training ground, and it's become a real training ground. And that's one reason why I think pulling out the troops now would be a horrible idea, because it will turn into a failed state. It will turn into another Afghanistan. It's already another Afghanistan.
It is. It really is already.
But if you don't have American troops, there are multinational troops or somebody who can guarantee law and order, which is not going to be the Iraqi army. Sorry. Then you're.
Are we ever going to have a democracy in an Arab country? I mean, what the president says, we're going to bring democracy to the Middle East, but we've had Israel there for a long time, and that's a democracy. It hasn't spread. It's been a center for all kinds of
As long as
problems.
you're not an Israeli Arab.
Exactly. So that's what I'm asking. Do you have to be an Arab to be able to have an Arab form of democracy? That's something we don't understand at all.
I don't think that there's any reason why there couldn't be a democracy in an Arab country. I think Lebanon is probably the closest. Jordan is not the closest, contrary to popular belief.
Which is not?
Jordan.
Jordan.
You can go to jail for sticking out your tongue at the king. Enough said. And I think what needs to happen in order for that to happen is that they need a lot of support from outside. Which I think Lebanon is increasingly going to get. You have the UN sort of. Investigating what happened with Hariri's killing. He was the prime minister of Lebanon who was assassinated. But there is no reason other than just sort of long-standing historical deals that other countries have made in order to keep dictators in power. I mean, look at Mubarak. It's going to be a long time before...
It's in Egypt, yeah.
Yeah, the president of Egypt who was recently
had
elected.
an election.
And I think we have this tendency to think that Arab countries can't have democracy. And I think the really great
do they
thing,
want it? Do the Arab?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Samir Kassir, who was a really wonderful guy.
And who is he?
He was a Lebanese journalist who was assassinated a couple of months ago in a car bomb, shortly after writing a column about Syria. And he always used to say that if there's going to be democracy in Lebanon, and there will, and he was very clear about that it will be despite America and not because of it.
Now, why is that? What are our interests there?
A lot of Arabs, and you see this in every Arab country, people have very long memories for American intervention. People remember that America supported Saddam. Iraqis are very conscious of that, and in Lebanon, people are very sort of painfully aware of the various sides that America took during the Lebanese Civil War, and so people remember that, and it makes them very hesitant to trust American intervention, which is kind of a shame, really, because I think America does, when America does come in on the right side or, with good intentions, then it makes people very quick to lose faith.
What's happening in Lebanon right now?
It's interesting. There was just a big arrest of a lot of top Lebanese security officials, and there's in mid-September, which is coming right up, there's going to be a UN investigator is going to release a report on what they found on who killed Hariri, which everyone in Lebanon pretty much is convinced was the Syrian government. And to really quickly.
So we have about a minute left.
Okay. Well, instead
and we
of
haven't even talked about Syria. So go on.
Oh, in any case, things are looking hopeful in Beirut and in Lebanon, but we shouldn't be too quick to assume that it's going to be a democracy there. You know, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, the government was toppled, and we saw it on TV, and there were pretty girls and waving flags, and it was great, but it's going to be a long haul. It takes a lot of time to build a democracy, as we've seen in Iraq.
So why did Syria want to overthrow the government?
They didn't.
Oh.
Syria kind of was the government.
Oh, I see. But he was not. He was resisting them.
He was resisting them, and Syria has always had a sort of controlling interest in Lebanon, which serves its interest in various ways, mainly economic. And I think they saw a threat to that, and that's sort of the short version.
So we'll have to come back and we can discuss Syria, because that seems to be is that the linchpin in a lot of this. I don't know what linchpin means. Is that the center of interest? It
holds everything together. In Lebanon it is, I think.
Yeah.
Samir always used to say that Lebanon wouldn't be free until Syria was free.
And Syria is not free.
Not now.
Well, thank you very much,
Thanks for
Annia,
having me.
and thank you for coming. Thank you for watching.